is wrong, and there are ways to mitigate that and ways to deal with it. But where I come back to conspiracy is there is so much money invested in the fossil fuel industry and in those things that burn carbon that they are influencing everything that we do. They're influencing our government, they're influencing our policies, and they're deliberately saying we have to sow the seeds of doubt so people will continue to burn fossil fuel. There was I'll finish with this, there was a study just recently by the, funded by the Koch brothers, who are big coal people, very, very rich, very climate change deniers. And they funded a study of the historical record of temperature increase. And their lead scientist was a climate skeptic. I think his name was Murphy, if I got it right. But at any rate, they did this extremely thorough study, at the end of which he said, I was wrong. I was wrong. Climate change is real. And it's happening faster than we thought, and it's being caused by humans. And if you could ever tell me of a climate skeptic, or a climate scientist who turned into a skeptic after looking at the evidence, or a doubter after looking at the evidence, I'd be interested, but they all go the other way. So there is a conspiracy. How conscious, well, in some ways very conscious. There's actually email records of saying, oh yes, what we have to do is sow doubt. We have to sow doubt. So I don't want to be depressive, but so I won't say too much. Because it also begs the question, how do we live now? You know, how do we live? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with this problem? You know, because we could spend, you know, just go and hide in a hole. What do we do? How do we deal with this? I mean, obviously we go on with our lives. You know, and one thing we do in going on with our lives is say, look how lucky we are to live in this time, and not in Continuum 2077, or it could be even worse, the Continuum's version of 2077. So we're very fortunate, but we also have to be very vigilant, I think, to try to protect what we have and make it continue. And on that note, I'll open up for questions and I'll talk about anything you like. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the way we view smoking has changed a lot since the X-Files. There's now stickers on movies saying that this movie is smoke-free. No character will... I'm not kidding.
No, that's right.
No character will smoke in this movie. I just want to know your thoughts about that, and do you actually believe... Because your character was so cool in X-Files. Do you actually... you know what? I think I started smoking the minute X-Files came out. I was a late smoker. I'm just kidding.
Don't. Now I really don't feel it. Because I had that crisis too.
I just want to know your thoughts on this whole attack on smoking and stuff, and how liberal it was during TV shows and movies at the time of X-Files, and do you actually believe that smoking on television gets kids to smoke?
I think it's a worry when attractive people smoke on television. It's hard to go. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that. The addiction to tobacco is, they say it's as strong as heroin. And I did it. I mean, I quit long before I did X-Files, but I went through the agonies of withdrawal to do that. Yes. Yeah. You.
Mr. Davis, regarding global warming, something is being done, actually. It's called geoengineering. With aluminum particles being aerosprayed into the atmosphere. The problem is that people like Dr. David Keith, who works closely with the Obama administration, his team hasn't done enough research into the effect of unleashing a highly reactive material such as aluminum into the environment. So the problem is that what's the greatest threat right now? Global warming, the disease, or the cure, which is geoengineering, controlling the climate, owning the climate?
It's a very good question, and we may very well come to the point where geoengineering is the only solution. People are afraid to talk about it because then people say, oh, well, we'll get some magical fix and we won't do all the other things we need to do to conserve, to reduce, and all those things. The difficulty with that particular idea of the pellets and whatever, that will in fact, if it works, would cool the planet. The carbon dioxide that we're still emitting, though, will still continue to acidify the oceans. So while you may stop the the heating effect of the carbon, you won't stop the acidification effect. And the oceans are now 30% more acidic than they were at the beginning of the industrial era. And so that's a danger. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you two options for questions, one of which will be fun, the other one you can do whatever you want.
Let's do fun. No.
Okay, all right.
No, do it.
So, the Season 7 episode On Me, all right?
Right.
So there's this scene that apparently didn't make it in, involving water skiing. So I'm wondering, how much crack smoking was involved in writing that scene?
Well, I'll tell you, no crack smoking is involved because I wrote the scene. It's even more absurd when you think of it, because Smoking Man, I was actually teaching Scully to water ski. Yeah, well, I didn't try anything. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite episode?
Do I have a favorite episode? Yes, usually I would say Talitha Kumi. There was another one though that I used to, but certainly that was one of my favorites because I love the whole philosophical background and the dialogue and the intensity of it. Yeah.
Do you have an episode that you feel was culturally relevant at the time of its release? Like, what do you think would be the most culturally relevant episode at the time when it was coming out? It's like current issues kind of thing at the time.
I'm going to be a politician and evade the question slightly and answer a slightly different one. Because I don't actually have an answer to you. I'm not sure. I don't know, and you probably know the episodes a lot better than I do anyway. But one of the things that really intrigued me was how the X-Files was relevant to that decade. It was the decade where we'd pretty much given up books. We'd started to work with the internet. We started to work digitally. Books had given us some sort of solidity, some sort of solid thing, and we had moved into this sort of vague world of digitization. And if you remember in the 90s, often it didn't work. It would suddenly disappear.
Yeah.
And so the whole issue of what's real and what's not real, I think, was very relevant at the time, or very kind of endemic to us. And I think the X-Files kind of really captured that whole notion. Yes?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions with the episode that highlighted you the most, Meetings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. Right. One of them was the writer of that obviously left it very vague whether your character was actually involved in the Kennedy assassination and the murder of the Kennedy assassination.
And the Buffalo Bills, and the Miracle on Ice, and yes.
Yeah, so that's my first question, and the other one is, can you still remember your box of chocolate speech?
Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That's as far as I can go. That episode was so interesting. I mean, obviously it's kind of bizarre. I mean, if you could